Hi everyone, and welcome to our first video of STEAMkids, where we learn all about science, technology, engineering, art, and math together in really fun projects. Today we're going to learn all about how to make a catapult. So, what is a catapult? So, a catapult is a machine that can launch things, and they've been used for a really long time, since 399 BCE. That's a super long time ago. And a ton of different people have used them over time, including the Greeks, the Romans, the Chinese, the English, and the French. And they've been used in order to protect themselves and to wage war against others. There are a few different types of catapults, and they all have different names and they all function a little bit differently, but the thing they have in common is that they all launch things. So a ballista, the first one there, is like a giant crossbow that shoots arrows really far away. And the mangonel, which is pictured in the middle, is what we typically think of when we think of a catapult. And the one we are making today is actually based on this design. And it was used to throw large rocks far and wide. And finally, there is the Trebuchet, which was a really popular siege weapon in France, which also threw really large objects at castle walls. So all of these machines give us a little glimpse into what life would have been like during this time. Catapults function as a simple machine, meaning that they help us do something easier and more efficiently. In the case of a catapult and other lever-style machines, they help us move very heavy objects farther with less effort than moving them by hand. And we will get more into the fun and the physics of how they work here in a bit, but let's jump into a bit of history about castles and how they've changed over time. Let's dive a little bit deeper into life in the Middle Ages. So when we think of the Middle Ages or the medieval period, we often think of knights and peasants and kings and lords, castles, and even the more fantasy things like dragons. So the Middle Ages were from 500 AD through 1500 AD. So that's 1,000 years. That's a super long time, and a whole lot of history and evolution can happen during that time. And as I mentioned earlier, catapults have been around quite a bit longer, but much of what we think about catapults comes from this age. So over that 1,000 years of the Middle Ages and even long before that, castles have undergone quite a few changes. They started with very simple buildings on hills that provide protection, and they eventually became huge fancy palaces that we think of today. These earliest castles were hill forts, pictured here, where the landscape was used to the holder's advantage to protect them. They were built up on a hill, which means that they're harder to get to. And the remnants of these hill forts can be seen all over England today. The next major evolution was to build castles out of stone so they wouldn't be burned down, which was the major drawback of those hill forts since they were constructed out of wood. But unfortunately, stone keeps were really expensive and they take a really long time to build, but they were used to show the power of the lord of the land when they were completed. The concentric castle comes next, and it is the best kind for defense. Multiple walls are constructed, like multiple rings of walls are up in this castle, which means that more weapons would be needed to take down the walls. Battles with castles are called sieges, and this is when catapults and other siege weapons became very popular in Western Europe. And the final castle is the palace castle, and this is when they've moved to be less for protection of land and goods and people and more into being a show of power and status for kings. So other than being really strong, castles had other lines of defense like moats, seen here, which are like a small lake which surrounds a castle, which makes it a lot harder to get into. And that's why you may see things about drawbridges that can be drawn up and then laid back down to let people in. But now that we know a little bit about castles and their history, we can get into the cool science behind catapults. The thing that makes catapults work is this thing called potential energy. If you've ever pushed a bike up a hill or pulled back a rubber band, You know that feeling that the bike wants to start rolling down the hill, or that the rubber band wants to snap back to where it was before. That feeling is potential energy. We are putting energy into that object and it's being stored until we let go. We are pushing and pushing this bike up a hill, and all that energy of us pushing it up there is being stored until it starts to roll back down the hill. Or we're putting a lot of energy into the rubber band by pulling it, and that energy is released when we let go and it snaps back. And that stored energy can be really strong, and it can be strong enough to move really heavy things like giant rocks to help break down castles. So with our catapult today, we can launch pom-poms like clear across the room. But back in the Middle Ages, they were using huge catapults, like giant catapults, to launch huge boulders to break down castle walls. All right, friends, let's get started with building our catapults. But before we do that, I want to go over what items you should have included in your kit and what you'll need in order to make this. So to start, you will have 8 normal popsicle sticks that are just rounded on both ends. You're also going to have 2 more popsicle sticks, one that is notched, where there are a couple of little notches on one side. The other side is normal. And you'll have 1 more popsicle stick that has notches on both ends. There you go. Hope you can see that. And I hope that you can see those in your popsicle sticks in your kit. You're also going to have 4 rubber bands, a plastic spoon, and a pom-pom. So to get started, we are going to use our 8 normal popsicle sticks. Gather them all together, and we're going to stack them up. Let's see if we can get these stacked. You're going to stack them up like so. You can kind of push them so the edges are all together. They're in a nice straight stack, like so. And you are going to take your rubber bands and wrap each end in them. This can be kind of hard, especially if you're a little bit younger or don't have a lot of experience doing this. So always ask for an adult if you need a hand. But we're just going to wrap both sides. I've got this side wrapped. I'm now going to wrap this one. And you don't have to wrap it a whole ton, just so that the rubber band stays on and it holds it snug and tight. And there we go. This is the base of our catapult. So the next step, you want to find out which one of your popsicle sticks is the one that has notches only on one side. These notches help hold the rubber bands in place when you start putting them together. So the popsicle stick with 1 notch, you are going to push it underneath your top popsicle stick. This can be kind of hard. You may want an adult to help you with this. I even have a little bit of trouble with this. Depends on how hard you or how much you wrap your rubber bands around, but you should be able to eventually slip your popsicle stick through like so. And so it will be on the top of your popsicle stick like this, with your notch sticking out on the shorter side. And you are going to flip this so that this is on the bottom. So your catapult will be sitting on the table like so. So then we are going to now attach our last popsicle stick, the one that has notches on both ends, to this one. So you have your base popsicle stick on the bottom, and you are going to take your other popsicle stick and hold them together like so, and you can kind of see that catapult shape coming together. So at this joint where the 2 popsicle sticks meet here, you're going to again wrap this in a rubber band. Again, this can be a little bit tricky. You can give it a couple of tries. If you need a hand, ask an adult to help you hold it still, or you can hold it while they wrap the rubber band around it. And so now I have them together. You can see makes this V shape, and we can already see that they are starting to bend together, and when I press them together, I can feel that they want to come apart, and that's that potential energy that we mentioned earlier. So we have our final steps to go through. So we have our spoon, and we are going to slip the spoon into the rubber bands that we just put on, the one rubber band that connects the two popsicle sticks together. So I'm going to just slide this in there so that it holds it in place. And it's, yep. So we slide that right in there so it holds it in place and it's resting on top of the popsicle stick. And we have our final rubber band, and we are going to wrap it around the popsicle stick and the spoon where the notch is, or close to it. We just want to make sure that the popsicle stick and the spoon don't come apart. And you may need to readjust it and move it around, but you should have a catapult. And you even have a little bucket up here to place your pom-pom. And so you can now start pulling it back, and you can see it pulling and pulling. And since I'm holding this up, the bottom popsicle stick is also flexing. But if it's on a tabletop surface, it'll just be this top popsicle stick that bends. You can see it pulling and pulling and pulling, and off it goes. All right, now that you have your catapult built, I hope that you can try out some different methods and some different tests on how to use it in the way that it would have been used in the Middle Ages. You can build walls out of paper, out of more popsicle sticks, out of Legos or building bricks or anything you can find, cardboard boxes even, and see what you can use this catapult to try and knock it over. I think that would be really fun. To extend the learning, you can also use different types of pom-poms or projectiles. Like I've got 2 different size pom-poms here, and see which one would travel farther and how far you pull it back, if that changes how far the pom-pom goes. And you can also try all kinds of different projectiles. Mini marshmallows are a really popular one that would be very fun and also very tasty. So I hope that you all enjoyed learning about the Middle Ages, about siege weapons, and about catapults. And I hope that you enjoy using yours. Bye.